Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Football House on House Enterprise. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Jake Zimmer. And Jake, we are entering week 8 of the 2025 college football season. Last week was crazy. A lot more upsets. A couple changes at the top for some teams. But overall, just another fantastic week as we continue to, get closer and closer to the first official college football playoff committee bracket, which will be released on November 4th. So we're, less than a month away. So for you, Jake, last week, what was the big story?
No, what do you choose? I mean,
It's
the
kind of hard to
biggest
pick.
one.
I mean, I know there's the obvious one, but it's not a huge front runner.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a bigger splash in recent history. I mean, we can have this debate over like what's the biggest, like, most surprising storyline, and I feel like even just for the sheer dollar value of James Franklin's buyout, that immediately jumps to the top. You only have Jimbo's and I always forget that Jimbo Fisher's was basically close to 80 million bucks.
Mhm.
But I think just the semantics behind what happened with James Franklin's firing from Penn State as well, of rumor, there are reports out that Adidas had driven this decision, right? And this is my message to our crew was like, I can't believe this is the timeline we're living in right now, right? Where days of old, it was the boosters, right? And it was kind of this unspoken agreement of, oh, look at how much influence the boosters have, and then it turned into this NIL wave, and now we are seeing pretty much confirmed reports of a sponsor driving the firing of a power five head coach that was in the top 10 for a good chunk of the start of this year, right? It's just crazy to think about how much this sport is really changing. We're seeing the effects of that right now with James Franklin's firing. So that was the big story for me. I think a couple other big things stand out. I think solid win for Bama. They were on the ropes on the road against Mizzou. Ole Miss avoids a scare, right? Michigan, you kind of question what's up with them going forward, right? Where does USC fit into all this after they win big against Michigan? Yeah, lots of hot stove topics this week for sure.
Yeah, one thing that is important to note, I know that was kind of the big headline that Adidas not only urged Penn State to make this change of firing James Franklin after he's been at this position since 2014. Not only were they urging it, but they were offering to help pay for the buyout, which now looks to be around $46 to $49 million. But from Front Office Sports, Daniel Roberts of Front Office Sports this Monday reported Penn State is saying that report is patently false. That's their exact quote. The report is patently false. This decision was made solely by Penn State. Adidas is not helping to pay the buyout for Coach Franklin. That's via
Well, now
front
they
office.
were intentional with their words there, right? The Adidas is not helping to pay the buyout, right? That does not necessarily exclude some senior level executive at Adidas saying, "Hey, we're gonna front this huge bill for your apparel going forward." I forget when their merch deal kicks in. I think it's next year, because I think they're either Under Armour or Nike right now. I'm forgetting what exactly they're repped by, but that doesn't mean necessarily that some executive at Adidas wasn't like, "I want this guy out," right? How are we gonna move forward with this, right? We were talking about Pitt a couple weeks ago, and Pat Narduzzi, and all the stuff that's going on there, and the conversations that the boosters were having, which I'm sure he's well aware of, right? Of like, when do they pull the plug on this guy? And it's the same kind of deal. Like, just you multiply that by 200, and that's what was going on at Penn State. You'd have to think, right? So
Yeah.
it's just this weird timeline where you really don't know who's making what decision at any given point regarding the personnel, the team, the coach, whatever, right? Super, super odd.
Yeah. So I mean, look, we can't say for sure, but according to Penn State, this decision was solely theirs. The buyout will be fully paid for by Penn State. So that's just an important detail, I think, in this whole thing. And like you said, Penn State's current uniform manufacturer is Nike, so they're wearing Nike
Yep.
stuff. And I just had a quick thought on the whole, the idea of now sponsors like NIL providers and uniform manufacturers, kind of having some pull in decisions like this. I think people are quick to cry out that this is just another one of these things in the game in college sports in general that is now frustrating, right? Like as this kind of moves towards a business. I think we'd be lying to ourselves though if to say that this is an entirely new phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
But before now it might be corporate sponsors, but before that it was donors. Before that it was school administration. Before that it was alumni networks. You know what I mean? So I don't really think this is one of those hashtag games gone situations, but it's definitely important to monitor. Like you definitely don't want the sponsorship to have too big of a hand in.
Yeah, and that's more the lens I'm looking at it here, Sam. Right? It's what precedence does this set, right? And this is I think it's no, it is not. You have to draw the line between no, it is not unheard of for a coach to part ways or for a school to part ways with a Power Five coach in the middle of the year, right? We've seen it already. We were talking about Oklahoma State and the change they made this year, a couple others, right? Sam Pittman gone from Arkansas, right? Like there's
We
a
might
lot
not
of,
be done. Like
yeah, that's true. I would be willing to bet we aren't done at this point,
Yeah.
actually, right? There will be some more movement and some more carousel with some frustrated coaches, right? Like Florida could be an interesting place that did they move on for Billy Napier, right? Like how does Baylor shape out, right? Like we were talking
Yeah.
about all this stuff a couple weeks ago. But yeah, like I think it's more about, okay, you have a coach that they're going to pay 50 million, right? They weren't all that bad this year. I mean, yeah, their loss against Northwestern was pretty bad.
You shouldn't lose that
a
game.
lot of no, you can't exactly. Should they have lost that game? No way, right? And was the season salvageable still for Penn State? Maybe. I don't know, but yeah, the precedence this sets is worth monitoring. Firstly, in the next couple weeks, but also long term, right? Like, does this affect deals that coaches get? Right? Does this change things in a buyout structure potentially? I don't know. Does it make the buyouts even greater? Right? Do coaches see this and go, "Hey, you might can be midway through the year. I'm not signing this deal unless you give me this massive buyout." And Franklin is the standard, right? This could go several different ways, and I think it's just like buckle up. It's kind of pointless to speculate over how that goes.
Yeah, I don't know if the season was salvageable after the Northwestern loss, to be honest with you, because you're looking at their schedule right now. I mean, they entered the Northwestern game 3-2. Their wins were against Nevada, FIU, and FCS Villanova, right? They were coming off a one-score loss to number 6 Oregon, at the time, a loss at UCLA. I think that might have been, you could argue that that's kind of where they got.
That was bad.
And then the Northwestern loss, and then looking at the remaining schedule, yes, there is a chance. There actually is a chance for them to get back into the playoffs. They're at Iowa this week, and then they've got Ohio State in the shoe, hosting Indiana, and then they've got a game against Nebraska, who have cracked the top 25. So yeah, like in theory, if you beat Ohio State and Indiana back to back, you're right. You could be right back in the playoffs.
Yeah, but
discussion,
that's not going to happen at this rate.
Yeah,
You're
like
right.
Those wins and then winning out would put you back in the playoffs, but like losing to UCLA and Northwestern shows that you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they probably go, if everything goes well, they probably go 4-2 in that stretch, right? Absolutely. Which is, you can't really afford to lose more games after that. And you're kind of waving the white flag after you lose the Northwestern, regardless of getting into the CFP again, right? Like it's kind of just like, hey, we're playing for a high bowl game, and we're going to see what happens. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think it did not look like mathematically it was salvageable. It did not look promising. That's for sure.
Yeah. The other big game, the big surprise game that I think we got to talk about: Texas beating Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. We all went with the Sooners, at least on the spread last week when we all kind of crumbled there. Texas won 23-6 against, at the time, the number 6 Oklahoma Sooners. Cracked their way back into the top 25. John Mateer, he ended up playing, but did not have a good game. 202 yards, no touchdowns, 3 picks. And then Arch Manning had an okay game, but it was really the Texas defense. That was the story of this game.
Yeah. Texas defense, I would say, and then an excellent fourth quarter too, right? Or excuse me, third and fourth quarter, I should say. So the second half for Texas, they put 20 up, they're down 6-3 going into half, and everybody's kind of like, yeah, what's the make of Texas right now? And they did, they did an excellent job of keeping the foot on the gas pedal. I was impressed with their run game again, right? It wasn't really flashy, but Quintravion Wisner, right? He 100 yards, right? He was their workhorse all day, right? Arch was, it allowed Arch to kind of back off and, play a little bit more composed than I think we've seen him. And Arch didn't really have any like crazy flashy plays. It was 21 for 27, 166 yards and a touchdown, but he was efficient, right? That's what you need him to do there. You need him to control the football, not put yourself in a hole against a really good Oklahoma team. And I think that's what they got. So another feather in the hat for Texas this year. I think they're right back in the discussion. They can make some moves, up the ladder later in the year, depending on how well they execute. And I think it just puts them right back in the conversation for sure.
Yeah, Arch definitely played a good game. He played a solid, composed game, but it was the story of the defense was the cornerstone for Texas against them.
Yeah, and then Texas, I think good opportunity for them going forward, right? You got 3 games against teams you should beat. Probably it's Kentucky and Mississippi State. Those are both on the road, but I mean, you got to handle business against those two. And then Vanderbilt's 17 now. You'll talk about this in some of the picks today, but we'll see if Vanderbilt's ranked in 3 weeks by the time they play them. So yeah, I think this is crunch time.
Absolutely. And then let's finish off talking about last week just by kind of rounding up our top 25. Ohio State still in the top spot. Nothing really getting in their way yet. A lot of movement up as a lot of teams fall. Missouri down. Alabama up. Ole Miss slightly down, but I think that's just because Miami, Indiana, and Texas A&M are all looking really good. Texas Longhorns, doing well to stay in the rankings, obviously, after that win over Oklahoma. USC, Utah, and USF cracking the top 25. I think those teams will probably stick around for a decent amount of time. And as you can see, the 3 newcomers replaced Arizona State, Penn State, and Iowa State. Iowa State, we didn't talk about that yet, but that was, a pretty wild result, losing to Colorado. Indiana was our high riser. They moved up 6 spots. And then Illinois and Michigan both falling 10 spots in the poll. And Tim, who's a frequent commenter on our House Enterprise Instagram, which you can be too if you follow the socials down below. I didn't put it in the graphic on the show, but Ohm Brown once again did not rank Texas number 1, despite weekly accusations that he has put Texas number 1. He has not, and he has not done for a long time. Let's get into our standings heading into week 8. Jake, you are our top guy.
My eyes deceive me? Wow.
Yeah, dude.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, this is a very topsy-turvy year. A very tough year for me. As you can see, I've fallen to 20 and 31. But Tondo and Cole had some pretty solid weeks as well. Cole getting back to 500 and Tondo just cracking into the winning record. A lot of great stuff. I mentioned our socials. We've got a couple people watching right now. So for all you folks watching, I would just encourage you to go check out our socials for everything that we've got to offer. We've got a lot more college football talk, a lot more NFL talk, some great football tape breakdown from Jordan Lauby on our YouTube channel, and maybe give it a retweet, send this over to one of your friends, or maybe tell them to listen to it on Spotify, this podcast, next day after we broadcast live. But Jake, getting back into it, you are our leading man in 2025. So let's see how you did last week. You got another push, your 4th of the year. So congrats to that.
Can't believe it. Wow.
A bit of a tough card for you last week, but you've kind of built up some good will in earlier weeks to stay above 500. But let's see what you've got in week 8.
Okay. I think like the volume is key, right? Like for me, I've just been putting a lot of picks down, I think. I don't really know. Who's to say if it's really more than anybody else's? But let's dive into some picks here. We'll start with LSU and Vandy. And like, look, on paper, I think the signals kind of tell you Vandy here. They're 9-2 head to head in games as the favorite over the past 4 seasons. The number that stands out to me is it's an issue and it's only been a favorite by a short number, right? And the favorite of when they're a favorite of under 10 points, they're 0-2, right? And that's a very small sample size. I'm a believer that those stats should help you make that decision, but you shouldn't. I don't mean to slander other outlets, but you should not trust an outlet that's just saying, "Hey, pick these people," and list just a bunch of against the spread and over under stats and no football analysis whatsoever. So the best of both worlds here on the show. You get a little bit of that, but you get some more analysis, right? And I think like I don't know. I'm looking at LSU and I'm not terribly impressed with Garrett Nussmeier right now, but I just think it's crunch time, right? Like they have to win this game, right? Like if I think if they want to stay relevant, they're really going to have to beat Vanderbilt here. Um, Nussmeier's been average. I think it needs to happen this week, or it's really not going to happen at all, right? Their saving grace has been their defense. I do think it's enough to stop Diego Pavia. He's had some rough red zone turnovers so far this year. And I think LSU can bring it to him, right? This is the kind of matchup that I don't love for a guy like Diego Pavia, who's, like I guess a 50-50 guy. You never know if he's going to run it or throw it in a way, right? I haven't looked at his splits, but that's just his skill set, right? Like he can rip off a big run, he can make a big play, but I think the LSU defense is primed to overwhelm him. So that's why I'm thinking LSU to potentially win this game on the road in Tennessee against Vanderbilt. So we'll see what happens there, but I really like LSU here, strictly because I think it's do or die. For Texas A&M, okay, I think the Razorbacks already gave their scare of the year, quote unquote. They almost picked off Tennessee, right? And I think that's it for Arkansas, right? I don't know that they're going to repeat something like that, especially against A&M, who Marcel Reed has impressed me a lot this year. I think their offense obviously goes through him. He's a guy that could potentially win the Heisman, right? If a couple breaks go his way, and he's a little bit down the odds sheet right now, but Beck has a bad game, somebody else has a bad game. I think he's right in that mix for Heisman, or at least to be a finalist. So look, I mean, A&M, I think, has a much better defense than Arkansas here. I think also there's that motivation of can A&M get in the SEC title game if they win this one, right? If they win out down the stretch, that's massive for their that they're pretty much a you can Sharpie them in to that title game. So that's huge for that program if they can get back there. So that's why I've got A&M for a touchdown here. Okay, the hot topic. I've come out on the show, Sam, and raved about North Texas, and South Florida just made me eat my words against North Texas last week. It was 63-36. I came here and said North Texas would run away with it, and South Florida had other plans. So I'm riding South Florida train this week. That's simple. Byron Brown, 245 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was super efficient. He threw for 80%. He was 22 for 28. But he also chipped in 82 yards, right? He ran the football 21 times. So you got 5 total from the quarterback there. They have a really good run game. They're top 25 in the nation in rushing yards as well. So I think this is a situation where USF they're home. They come out buzzing. They put FAU down by a few scores at the beginning of the game. Owls are trying to chase them the rest of the game, and they never make it close. That's how I think this game's going to go. And I think South Florida can keep climbing up the rankings here. Good football team. We're going out west to Utah State, -3.5 over San Jose State. And this one intrigued me because, looking at the records, both teams are kind of in desperation mode here, right? You look at what happened last week for both these teams. You have San Jose State that blows a chance to win a game against Wyoming on the road. They blew a 2 touchdown lead, right? In the fourth quarter, they had a 2 touchdown lead against Wyoming and they blew it. Utah State's down by 1 at Hawaii last week, and then they give up 17 points and get shut out in the fourth quarter.
Mhm.
So, like, these are two teams that you kind of have to eliminate, the demoralizing nature of those losses last week and say, okay, anything's on the table, right? So I look at the facts. Good chance San Jose State is down their top 2 running backs. Their run game is subpar as it is, so that ain't good, right? That is, they're down to RB3 in a RB room that's not that great. I flag that as an area that makes me love Utah State here. Um, they've also committed 11 turnovers on the year, right? They're not holding on to the football, San Jose State, so that's another feather in the cap for Utah State. Here's the splits. San Jose State 0-3 on the road, Utah State 3-0 at home, right? I think they're 100% going to cover this. They are also 100% in covering when they're a 3.5+ favorite this year. Advantage Aggies for me there. We'll go to Washington versus Michigan. I don't think Michigan's bad, right? I actually, as you saw in my card last week, I picked them to at least beat a +3 against USC. I just think their 2 losses here reveal a lot about like what kind of team they actually are, right? And they got blown out, right, against USC and Oklahoma. These were not close. It took everything they had to beat Matt Rule's Nebraska too, right? And great, Nebraska's a good team. I think we're seeing that, but kind of makes you perk your ears up. I think the problem here for me is when you get rid of Michigan's run game, they're one dimensional, right? And Bryce Underwood, he's played pretty well, I thought, this year, but he does not operate very well when you take the run game away, right? Like they'll just send pass blitzes at him and they'll start double teaming guys, and then he starts kind of second guessing himself. That's what I've seen from most of the analysis. And then you enter Washington, who's eighth in the NCAA against the run, right? They've had a pretty good team. They've hung in with good teams like Ohio State and all that. And they so that's the flag for me, right? And then I'm also looking here. They only allowed 2 teams to get over 100 yards of rushing this year, and that's Ohio State and Rutgers, right? So I like Washington to at least keep this close, if not to potentially win the game. Obviously, you got to go into Michigan and pull off a win in Ann Arbor. I recognize that might handicap this a bit, but I think a touchdown might be too much. I think we're looking at a 1 possession game here in Ann Arbor. Back to North Texas now. I'm trusting them again. Okay, this is a bounce back game. I don't think North Texas is bad. I think they just ran into a buzzsaw. UTSA had their way with a banged up Rice team last week, but I still think North Texas has the juice. Right, it's their wake up call. You get one wake up call every year. That was it. I like QB1, Drew Mestamaker. He had to throw 48 passes last week. He was asked to do a lot, and he threw 3 picks. Right, like not the best decision making for him, but I actually thought he looked okay for the most part. Like he still looked like a really good quarterback. And I think USF's defense, I blame more for that than I do, for his decision making. So all for a bounce back here. Air Force -3.5 versus Wyoming, right? So Wyoming, they, as we know, San Jose State, they kept it real close, right? Or excuse me, they not kept it close. They came back, um, avoided a collapse basically. So they're stumbling in, and I think honestly, like Air Force, they're 1-5, but their offense is humming right now. You got to look at their stats. They're top 20 in the nation in total yards, rushing yards, points, and third down efficiency. And a lot of that is with Liam Zarka. He's got 100+ yards in 4 straight games. They're running back. They run the football so well. Wyoming does not impress me. I cannot overlook that. Weird Tim Kirkjian-esque stat here. Wyoming has lost 17 of the last 18 October games as a road underdog, too. So just putting that out into the universe here.
Wow.
So we'll see if they keep that streak up. I would really hate for that to be 17 of 19. Okay, my locks of the week here. FCS are going to be Drake over Davidson. Drake's defense is top 20 in the FCS. Total wagon. They course corrected after getting their behinds handed to them against South Dakota State and South Dakota. I really like what they're doing. Davidson's 1-5. They don't impress me at this moment. Bottom tier of the Pioneer Football League right now. I take Drake. My FBS lock is Oklahoma here. All right, we talked about Oklahoma a little bit. I think the Sooners finally got their reality check. Right. Like it was just too much of a pipe dream. I kept I was on the fence about Mateer all year. And then he got hurt, and I'm like, oh man, they're completely screwed. And then he came back and Texas had their way with him. I figured it was either going to be Auburn or Texas that kind of gave him the wake-up call. I think I may have actually sprinkled some action on Auburn on the show a couple weeks ago. Turned out to be Texas, right? So I still think Oklahoma's a really good football team, right? I think South Carolina is going to try to turn the pressure up on them, but ultimately, I'm still not very impressed by South Carolina's offense this year. Their defense, maybe, but their offense, I just don't know how well they're going to hang in with Texas here. So I think it's Oklahoma in a get right game here. I'm pretty confident in that, and that's why they're my lock of the week here. So, yeah, that's a card here.
Love it. Let's get into Tondo's picks. Tondo had a pretty solid week, allowed himself to go over 500. He also had a push, so he's kind of taking a page out of your book. But his picks, he's got Miami minus 13.5 over Louisville, Nebraska minus 8.5 versus Minnesota, LSU plus 2.5 versus Vanderbilt, A&M minus 7.5 versus Arkansas, Texas Tech minus 7.5 versus Arizona State, USC plus 9.5 versus Notre Dame, Utah versus BYU over 49.5, Iowa minus 2.5 versus Penn State. Wow. FCS lock, Dayton moneyline versus Butler. FBS lock, he's rocking with you, Oklahoma minus 5.5 versus South Carolina. Miami, untouchable in the ACC?
Oh, man. Let's look at the ACC standings here.
So they're
because Georgia Tech exists, right? Like, did they play this year? Let's see. No, they do not play. Wow. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of robbed of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my thing. I think Miami's fantastic, but I also think Georgia Tech, you just can't overlook the start they've had and the quality of the wins they've had as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about Duke and Virginia? Where do you feel like they kind of fall into play here?
Oh, man.
Just benefit of an early start.
Yeah, let's see Duke's schedule. I'm obviously so I'm pretty impressed with Virginia's resilience in that crazy game over Florida State a couple weeks ago. And they kept it close against Louisville. I don't know, the rest of their schedule kind of cupcakey for me at this point. Coastal, North Carolina State, William & Mary, and Stanford, all not a single win makes you go, oh wow, look at that, right? I think I'll be. And there's not anyone on the schedule that really screams like, oh man, what a game that'll be, except Duke down the road, right? Which, to the next point, let's look at Duke's schedule. 3 in a row. They lost to Illinois and Tulane. They got killed by Illinois too. You remember that early in the year? That was a game that we looked back and said like, hey, whoever wins this is really on their route to a good year, right? And it was Illinois. And they manhandle them as 45-19. So I think, the ACC probably does run through Miami until further notice. I think the rest of the way out for Georgia Tech going to be interesting. I think it's much harder than someone like Virginia has it. You got Duke, Syracuse, NC State. So Duke and Duke, good matchup. Syracuse, on the road at NC State and Boston College, nothing impressing me there. And then if you win against Pitt and Georgia, now you're cooking with gas, right? So I think if they can go 5-1 in that stretch for Georgia Tech, then it gets a heck of a lot more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's get into Cole's card. Solid week for Cole. He got just to 500, But this week he's got LSU +2 versus Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech money line versus Duke. That'll probably stop Duke in their tracks in, trying to get to the ACC championship game. Oklahoma -5.5 versus South Carolina. Texas A&M -6.5 versus Arkansas. Maryland money line versus UCLA. Have not seen a lot of action on the Terps for us this year, so that's very interesting.
Yeah. But I feel like we've talked about the Terps a lot, right? And
they've been around.
Started off super hot. They were 4-0. And then those losses against Washington and Nebraska, they were close, but it's just like those were both at home, and now they've got to go on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Does UCLA have a little bit of swagger now that they knocked on that they got a coach out of his job, right? It's that turn Nico season around. I don't know what to think of Maryland right now.
That could be very interesting. Alabama versus Tennessee. He's picking the over at 58.5.
Yeah,
he
that's one we
just
haven't talked about yet.
narrowly missed an over last week. Oregon, Indiana over 54.5. The total in that one was actually 50. So that was a tough beat for Cole. Alabama versus Tennessee over 58.5. FCS lock, Villanova money line versus Hampton. That's Villanova at right now trying to get on top of the CAA. Hampton sitting at the absolute bottom. And then his FBS lock, he's thinking the Mean Green are bouncing back as well. He's got North Texas -4.5 versus UTSA. Then my card, avert your eyes, it is disgusting last week, but I'm trying to bounce back here. Oklahoma -5.5 versus South Carolina. Texas -6.5 versus Texas A&M -6.5 versus Arkansas. LSU +2.5 versus Vandy. BYU -3.5 versus Utah. Oklahoma State +21.5 versus Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati can win that one by 2 scores, but I think Oklahoma State can cover a 20-point spread. Villanova moneyline versus Hampton. Like I said, Villanova, trying to leave the CAA with a bang. And then my FBS lock, I think if Cole was on here, because Cole is our resident Notre Dame fan, I think if he was on here, this would have been our game of the week. And I've got USC +9.5 versus Notre Dame. USC has, I don't want to say they've quietly worked their way up the Big Ten, but I think it's a fitting way to say it just because of so many other teams that have been on top of the conference right now. And I know this is not a Big Ten opponent, but to me, this kind of does feel like not a coronation game, but like an heir apparent determination game, if that makes sense. Like them going up against the national runner-ups last year at Notre Dame, possibly getting a win. I had them at least covering the 9.5, but if they can get a win here and then head into the rest of Big Ten play with a win like that on their shoulders, I think they're a sneaky contender for the Big Ten title game. I think they need some things to go their way. Obviously, they need Indiana or Ohio State to get out of their way. I'm looking at their schedules right now. They definitely don't play Indiana.
That's pretty. You're talking USC, right?
Yeah, USC. USC does not.
Nebraska and Oregon are really the only two that stand out to me. And if you
they don't play Indiana or Ohio State, so they need a big break. But I mean, right now they are kind of if they could just move up the top 25, they're third in the Big Ten right now. They can kind of be in the driver's seat for a playoff spot with a win here.
Think about how much that 34-32 loss at Illinois stings right now.
Absolutely.
They win that game. That is a completely different. They are the hunted, I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas they are still hunting, right? And it's wide open, the Big Ten right now, though. It's. I think besides Ohio State, it's logic would tell you it's Ohio State, Indiana, but one of them is going to lose, right? So it's. Do you pick off? When's the right time to pick off one of them? Yeah.
And look, the AP poll is obviously not the college football playoff poll, right? So you can't really. I mean, I feel like they are very interconnected. Like they kind of parallel each other in plenty of occasions, except for some very controversial, instances. Hashtag Florida State 2022 or 2023.
Jordan Travis.
Yeah, hashtag Jordan Travis. Hashtag let the Knowles play. Just keep going.
Keep on going.
No, I'm just kidding. But USC right now sits at 20th in the AP poll. I think if you are an at-large team, you want to comfortably be in the top 10s, just so accounting for two conference champs outside the top 12 that get those auto bids, right? So they do kind of have a lot of ground to make up, but there are teams. Obviously, Notre Dame that would put them immediately within the top 15 next week with a win over Notre Dame. I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
So if they can keep doing that and then just slowly over the next 4 to 5 weeks work their way up, I think they'd be in a really good position.
Yep.
And with that, let's get into our game of the week. As you can see, it is Ole Miss at Georgia. This game is kicking off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, and it should be a crucial matchup in SEC play. Ole Miss heads into this one perfect. They are undefeated, 6-0. Their best win so far has been against LSU. I would also give them a lot of credit for that win against Tulane. Tulane was a kind of snowballing team. They were kind of trying to make their case as a group of 5 rep out of the American, and then Ole Miss just kind of beat them down 45-10 to stop them in their tracks. And then obviously 2 weeks ago, their win over LSU 24-19 kind of put them in the driver's seat atop the SEC. And then their biggest matchup, obviously upcoming, is Georgia, who 5-1, got a great win over Tennessee, an absolute shootout, 44-41. But like we've seen in many years past, especially in this decade, they could not once again get over the hump against Alabama. They lost 24-21 for their first loss of the year, first loss in SEC play. I don't think that a second loss in SEC play would necessarily knock Georgia out of the SEC title picture, but it would really, really put them on their heels. So for you, who's going to be the difference maker for Georgia in this game?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think this through and so just full disclosure. So the reason I picked Ole Miss to cover this is, number one, I just think it's too steep, first of all. But like when you look at Georgia, they've had 3 marquee games for me this year, right? Tennessee, which is a win, 44-41. That Alabama, 24-21 loss. And then they had Auburn, which I think you lump in there too for now, right? Like I think Auburn has a better team than they've had in years. And there's one thing in common about all of these, and it's the slow starts, right? Like Tennessee game was 21-7 after the first quarter, Tennessee, right? You can't chase, right? And they give them credit. They've won that game, right? So like, I'll go take a hike if Kirby Smart tells me, hey, yeah, great. How's that working out for you, right? Alabama, they go down 24-14 at half, right? They lose that game 24-21. So they shut out Alabama in the second half, but they can't. They only score 1 touchdown. And then Auburn is 10-3. Auburn at half, right? And those are you just can't do that in the SEC. Like, so that doesn't really impress me, which is why I'm going Ole Miss here. It's like, I think this is going to be really close, right? Like, Georgia's done nothing to say, hey, we can route these guys, right? Other than like, is Vegas's claim to this? Well, hey, Ole Miss isn't that great, so whatever, right? Like, I don't know. I just that just doesn't jive with me too well, right? So I don't know. It's I hate to take the cop-out answer, but like, let's see what Gunnar Stockton has, right? Like, I don't think he impressed much against Alabama. I think he had his best game of all those against against Auburn, 23 for 36, is certainly the most volume. So yeah, I think Georgia they've got the best front in probably the last 20 years of the SEC, right? Like that's a program you look at with consistently the best defensive line, right? So they're going to throw a massive rush at you. They're going to try to force them into some passes probably. So you got to get a good game from Gunner. You can't really rely on the running backs in this one to carry you through all this. So I mean, as much as Chauncey Bowens has been getting a lot of volume. I mean, Gunner's actually been running the ball too. He's got 220 yards and 6 touchdowns on the ground this year. So I think it's going to be how well Georgia moves the football if they want to cover this here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the way that they moved the football last week against Auburn is kind of why I had the Dogs going -7.5 here. Gunnar Stockton, okay game, but it's just the way that they move the ball on the ground, and I feel like just the amount of weapons that Stockton has at his disposal here kind of puts Georgia up on top. I also just feel like this defense has, they've gotten it done. They shut out Auburn. Not only did they come back and win against Auburn, they shut them out the entire second half. Right? I think that gives a lot of credit to Georgia. So I think that's why I'm going Dogs.
Yeah, and look, I think a very real conclusion we can all arrive at is that Georgia will win this football game, right? Like I actually do think if I were taking the money lines, I would take Georgia on this, right? They're at home, right? It's a game that I think Georgia has the better football team than Ole Miss, but do I see them laying 8 points? That's just what I can't get over right now, right? So that's my thought, and that's why I just can't get it out of my head that it just seems too much for me right now for where both these programs are at.
Yeah, and so for you, I mean, say Ole Miss. Let's kind of take a look ahead at these schedules, right? And let's talk about kind of the implications of both an Ole Miss win and a Georgia win. So for you, Ole Miss, I mean, their remaining schedule. I kind of like doing this with a lot of the game of the weeks. Like, who needs this a lot more, especially when it's in conference? So Ole Miss's schedule after Georgia, at Oklahoma, hosting South Carolina, hosting the Citadel, hosting Florida, at Mississippi State for the Egg Bowl. Georgia, hosting Florida. At Florida, who is a tricky team. They're a spoiler team, right? At Mississippi State, hosting Texas, hosting Charlotte, hosting Georgia Tech. I think Georgia needs this a lot more.
Yeah, I would say so. Like Ole Miss reading that schedule out. I mean, they took care of business earlier in the year. I think a solid win over Arkansas when they were kind of still in the mix. Beating LSU did wonders for them at the end of September. That's for sure. So yeah, I mean, like Ole Miss loses this one, and then worst comes to worst, let's say they lose to Oklahoma too. That puts them at 6-2, and then they kind of cupcake to the end of the year, assuming South Carolina kind of fades out and they don't have a freak loss in there to Florida or Mississippi State. Georgia just needs this more, right? Like they need to win this game because at worst Ole Miss goes 9-2 or whatever it is. You'd have to think, right? And those 2 losses come back to back, and Lane Kiffin's going to be, lighting a fire under everybody. They're not going to slip too far in the rankings. You'd have to think, even if they do lose back to back to Georgia and Oklahoma. So yeah, it's like Georgia. They're not on life support, but a win would go miles in their resume. I think it would shut a lot of people up, and it would put Georgia maybe firmly even in the top 5 next week too.
Yeah, and look, their playoff hopes are not out of their hands until that Georgia Tech game, right? Like, say they stay solid the rest of the year into that Georgia Tech game. Like usually, they always finish the season against Georgia Tech, but this is a very different Georgia Tech.
This isn't your mother's Georgia Tech, yeah.
Yeah, so it still gives them a chance to make the playoffs. But I think if you're Kirby Smart, I think you're saying to your guys, like, look, our shot at the SEC championship is kind of out of our hands by mid-November. These next 3 to 4 games are like the bread and butter, like the meat and bones, I should say, of our schedule. Like these are the most important games if we want to make the SEC championship game. Because, Ole Miss is playing SEC opponents all the way through the end of the year. So that'll be very crucial.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, for you, Jake, anything else left in this on this Saturday slate that you feel like people should check out?
Man, we haven't talked about Utah BYU. That's an interesting
the Holy
one.
War.
Sure is. Combined 11-1 record. BYU's humming right now. Utah's right back in the mix. Utah got humiliated a couple weeks ago by Texas Tech. That was one that I think we were all super disappointed in Utah with that one. We're like, damn, that would have been nice. That'll be a really good tilt. What else have we not discussed? Let's see. I mean, LSU Vandy we discussed a little bit. Yeah. I'm interested to see what happens with Louisville and Miami, right? And I may be living delusions of grandeur thinking Louisville belongs in the top 25 still, but I don't know. I think they might be able to make this close. I really do. If not for something going the other way in overtime this against Virginia, Louisville will be 5-0. Louisville will be getting some more top 25 votes, and it wouldn't be just me. We'll see how Miami responds there. I don't have much else. I don't know. I'm curious to see if you think we forgot anything. Maybe Texas to see if that wasn't just a fluke against Kentucky on the road. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the question, right, for Texas. That's going to be the question for them every week. Like, how legit is this team? How legit is Arch Manning?
I mean, Mizzou Auburn, right? That's it. Mizzou, were they just here for the ride the first 5 weeks? Or are they gonna get a good win on the road in Alabama? Right, that's another one that stands out.
Yeah, I think this is Auburn's chance to crack back into the top 25. But yeah, I think.
But they're Auburn's 3-3. Like I don't know. Does that do enough for them? Do you think if they win that game?
I think it could.
I mean, the only saving grace is their losses have been against really good teams like Oklahoma, A&M, and Georgia. Right, so it's like, I don't. Yeah, I guess that's the only thing saving them. So.
I mean, I think if Illinois just missed the cut in the AP top 25 this week, so I think if Illinois is falling off, then I think Auburn is kind of floating around there. But obviously there are some pretty solid teams. Like if you're looking at the top 25, like all the teams like receiving votes in this week's AP poll, all the teams receiving votes are teams that are trending down. The top 2 receiving vote teams are teams that are trending down. Illinois, Michigan, and then you got Washington, UNLV, and Navy trending up. But I think Auburn, is a better team than those 3 teams. But
yeah, definitely.
Maybe not. But I think that'll do it for this week of the Football House. Another great card. Hopefully we can, the rest of us can be just as good as Jake this year.
I can't believe you're saying that after the start I had.
I know. What a world we're living in, man. I'm pretty miserable. But keep checking out House Enterprise. You see on the ticker below, all of our socials. So make sure you check us out on Instagram. We're on X. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. And check out house-enterprise.com for updated blogs on college football, college basketball, which is right around the corner. Some NFL. Jordan Laube is doing some great NFL tape breakdowns. He broke down, what went wrong for the Eagles in that loss to the Giants last week. That was a pretty crazy game. So if you're an Eagles fan and you're still got your head in your hands trying to figure out what happened, Jordan is the man for you. Make sure you follow Jake at JakeZimmer12 on X, myself at SamWan2878. And until then, keep watching the Football House. Keep checking out our old videos. Keep checking out our game of the week. Tell your friends to listen to this pod next day on Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. And have another great Saturday watching college football. So for Jake Zimmer, I'm Sam Basel. This has been the Football House, and we'll see you guys next time.